Hi Fox, how are you doing? A very interesting seventh round here in the candidates today, with lots of interesting games, and that's not a way of speaking, just a way of speaking, because well, as an example, you just have to take a look at this razor sharp game we're gonna see today, the game between Kramnik and Mamedyarov, in which we're gonna have an extremely unbalanced and absolutely messy middle game. So focus on that. That's gonna be very exciting. It was an interesting game for the standings, as Kramnik is trying not to go down from the top of the tournament. So let us see what he can do today. He was playing white against Mamedyarov. d4, knight f6, c4, e6. This seems to be almost a compulsory way to start games in this tournament. Knight f3, d5, knight c3. We have the queen's gambit declined, and once again, as against Aronian, Mamedyarov, the GM from Azerbaijan, uses the Ragozin defense, bishop b4. Aronian takes on d5. Now bishop g5. Sorry, Aronian. I was meaning Kramnik, of course. I was just thinking about that game. Kramnik plays c takes, and now bishop g5, knight bd7, and I was meaning Aronian played knight d2 in that game against Mamedyarov. Now Kramnik plays queen c2, a favorite of Carlsen, of course, for instance. It is much more popular to play a very much normal move here, e3. Now a typical c5 comes, bishop d3, queen a5. Now white usually plays queen c2, etc. But okay, queen c2 at the first opportunity also makes sense, putting the queen on the light square diagonal. Now c5, e3. White could choose to create an isolated queen pawn for black. d takes c5, and after queen a5, now the bishop must go back. Knight d4, for instance, is a threat, so too much pressure on the knight on the pin. Bishop d2. Now queen probably will take on c5. Well, black has an isolated queen pawn, just a matter of taste to take it or to try to beat it. But e3 instead played Kramnik. Now still queen a5 is a very typical move in this opening, so that after bishop d3, black plays c4, winning space on the queen side and chasing that bishop to another place, which is normally bishop f5, which one of the main positions in the Ragozin. Now both players castle, and rook e8. Black just must avoid e4 in good conditions for white, so he puts lots of pressure on that e4 square. Knight d2, still kind of trying it. I guess this is its main idea, to try to play e4 someday in good conditions. Now g6, Kramnik decides to exchange that. Bishop takes on d7. Of course, knight takes d7 must be taken, otherwise the knight on f6 is hanging. So the knight takes on d7, of course, and h4. Interesting move. Tries to be an aggressive move, maybe to play h5 someday, I guess, to open up black king's position. This had previously been tested by players like Cheparinov, a second of Topalov, who played it against Mamedyarov in 2007, for instance. In that game, Mamedyarov played knight b6. Also, it has been played by other strong GMs like Sokolov or Melkumian from Armenia. b5 is black's response here. In the other game, as I said, against Cheparinov in 2007, Mamedyarov had played knight b6, probably, well, maybe he didn't like something of that game. Now he plays b5, a4, and of course this is letting black with very little choices. There is a threat to take on b4, b5 with the pawn, etc. And well, taking on a4 is a horrible move. Rook takes a4, the bishop will be very difficult to keep covering. So not a great move to play. If queen b6, another pawn will be taken, attacking both queen and bishop, and this is a disaster. Otherwise, well, it is almost compulsory to take on c3. Now b takes c3. Kramnik obviously wants to keep queens here, and b4, threatening to have a very strong protected passed pawn or already on the 6th rank for black. So white takes on b4, queen takes b4, and now that this knight on d2 doesn't have that many great squares to go, I mean he can go to f3, but still from f3 it could only jump to e5, which is protected by the knight and black knights and knight. So Kramnik plays pragmatic here. He goes knight b1. The knight will go to c3, where it will be quite a strong piece, as defending a4 and attacking black's kind of weakness on d5. Queen goes to d6. Mamedyarov will try to regroup his pieces. Knight c3, queen c6, rook fb1, taking the open file. Bishop a6. Now the queen goes to d1. Light squares are likely to be important in this game here in this direction to the king side, so the queen is more or less well placed there. f6, interesting move. Well, black is trying to avoid some threats of white on the king side. It may not seem that white has something, but for instance, a seemingly normal move, rook a b8, but now queen f3, attacking the pawn on d5, which in fact is difficult to protect because the knight cannot go to f6. It's guarded by the bishop and the queen. And if, for instance, knight b6, now just the pawn goes ahead, a5, the knight must retreat, and white just takes the pawn on d5. So it's not so easy to play here for black. So black must be careful not to be just careless and let white create an initiative against d5 in the king side, etc. f6 is very appropriate to stop this. Bishop f4, now rook a d8, protecting the d5 pawn, weak pawn. Queen still goes to f3. Well, now that we have the queen on the light square diagonal, you may think why not to play h5 instead of queen f3. It was certainly possible, I think. g5, well, you can go to h2, and if, for instance, knight b6, improving the knight, white can push h6. The pawn is already kind of crapping black's king, and well, this position is black must be must be careful here because his king is now not feeling that great, for instance. But okay, queen f3 was played here by Kramnik. Knight f8, black is regrouping. Bishop h6, and now at the first sight an enigmatic move, king f7. Well, the point is, as we will see, to protect the pawn so that the knight can go to e6. Rook b2, so Mamedyarov plays the knight to e6 so that after rook a b1 he puts the knight on g7 with the idea to go either to h5 or f5, regrouping his pieces, relocating this knight to a better square. Kramnik avoids that with a very aggressive move, g4, not caring about his king's security because its position is very safe. So g4 stops the knight from going to f5 or h5. Queen goes back to g8. The king goes back to g8. Now queen f4, maybe with the idea someday to go to b8, controlling the dark squares there. The king goes back to f7, and well, kind of waiting, I guess, and Kramnik just blows the center part with e4. Clearly, I guess he had to risk a little because standings are very tight in the top part of the standings of the table, cross table, so he must fight here. Other players like Aronian or Anand in the standings, top in the standings, won't be waiting for him, so he tries to open the center and go for the victory. Now knight e6 is the move played by Mamedyarov, who seems logical, attacking the pawn, attacking the queen. If black took, now d5 probably would be the move, queen d6, and well, Kramnik would probably not take. he would go to queen d3. Now he's attacking the pawn on a7, for instance. He has the idea to play bishop f4, attacking the queen. Both of his rooks are controlling very well the b file. So, well, this may be objectively not so bad for black, but probably is a little dangerous for him to play, as white may have some active lines, some activity against black kings, which may lack a little bit of space. But okay, knight e6 seems also reasonable. But this, after e takes d5 by Kramnik, well, this lets black with very little choice. Queens must be exchanged. Knight takes f4, d takes c5, now g5, threatening to trap the bishop right now. So to avoid that, h takes, f takes. Now the pawn on g5 would be hanging. c5 instead he plays. Kramnik doesn't take the pawn right now. He's keeping advancing his passed pawns, which are in fact going to be very the important part of this game, as you will see. Rook d6, attacking the bishop, so the bishop now must take on g5. But suddenly black has this knight h3 check. Of course, Kramnik should have this all calculated. He is not going to just blunder the piece for a couple of pawns without having calculated it. Knight h3, fork, king g2, knight takes g5. Black has a bishop for 2 pawns, but these 2 pawns are passed and connected. Well, the rook on d6 is there to stop the pawn from going to d6 right now, but well, this is a sharp position, unbalanced one. Here bishop c8, and certainly looking good move. The bishop on a6 isn't doing great job here, staring at his own bishop, so it's relocated to a better place, attacking g4. Now rook b8, passed pawns must be protected and encouraged to keep going forward, so rook b8 looks sensible. Now rook f6, quite a good move. Instead, bishop takes g4 would be a blunder, because now after rook takes e8, king takes e8, rook b8 check, and there is no logical way to stop this pawn from promoting. That's why rook f6 is looking good, because now there are lots of weaknesses on the f file. Rook a8 is played here, and rook f4, attacking g4 with the rook as well. f3, and well, here comes one of the something you could name mistakes of the game. Mamedyarov took on f3 with the rook, attacking the knight. It seems it was much stronger to take with the knight, so that if king g3, now rook takes g4 check, king could takes on f3, but now rook g6, and there is a threat to play bishop g4, discover check, taking the rook on a8 for free, and basically there is nothing that great that white can do. In fact, the engine suggests to take on c8. So after rook f6 check, intermediate move, for some reason king g2, rook takes on c8, and well, although white has a couple of connected passers here, these rooks are quite strong, and white king will be in danger here. This game should be winning for black. Well, instead rook takes f3 basically seems natural, but the engine says it's much better to take with the knight. Now d6 is played, another seemingly mistake, but it's difficult to be to judge them very severely, because this is a very sharp position, a difficult one. You could imagine this is the move for things they had. I didn't have the chance to watch it live today, so I can just imagine they had time trouble here. d6, well, the move suggested here was rook b to b8, attacking the bishop on c8, so that a couple of exchanges would happen here. Rook takes c3, rook takes c8, rook c2 check, king g3, rook c3 check, king g2, and well, black could have this kind of perpetual check here. But d6 is giving, it seems, black lots of edge, and to a certain point Mamedyarov will take advantage of it. He takes on g4. Of course, there is an attack on the rook on a8, so it takes on e8, queen takes, rook b8 check, and now last chance for Mamedyarov to keep this like a won game. He plays king f7. Of course, there is no threats of taking promoting, because if c8 queen, bishop takes, queen takes, but the rook takes on c3, so black is up a pawn on the piece, and this d6 pawn will be easily stopped. The king is too near. So Kramnik plays rook d8, bishop h3 check, king h2, rook takes c3. At this point, objectively speaking, white must be lost, but this is very sharp. d7, and what a position. White is down 2 pieces, a bishop and the knight, but he's able to still keep playing. He's not completely lost at all. That loss that he has to resign, because he has a couple of connected passed pawns on the 7th. So this is basically a very, very sharp and an extremely interesting position. Blunders are in the air everywhere I look around. That's the only thing I can say here. Rook c2 check, king g3, rook g2 check. Here Mamedyarov plays very accurately. King h4, bishop e6, rook f8 check, king takes f8. This is the final mistake by black. Instead, it was suggested to play king g6. Now if rook g8 check, king h6, and if rook takes g5, rook h2, king g3, and now a beautiful bishop takes d7. So if white takes on g2, of course black takes g5 and the game is over. But if rook d5, now rook check from h3, king g2, bishop c8, and if suddenly, for instance, rook d8, threatening to take and promote, whatever, well, don't forget black has another passed pawn on the c file. He goes to c3, so that if rook takes c8, c2, and that pawn on the c file is unstoppable. So, well, this was more or less the winning line for black. Mamedyarov didn't see it, sorry. He played king takes f8, now c8, queen, promoting to a queen check, and now finally the final mistake. He goes to g7. He should have gone to f7, it seems, and white just cannot promote a second queen, because once again, impressive position. White has 2 queens on the board, just promoted, brand new, but he's going to checkmate it with black's pieces. Knight f3, only move king h1, rook h2, queen h4, rook takes h4, checkmate. There it goes. Isn't chess beautiful? White has 2 queens on the board, but he's getting checkmated. If he, well, white has a queen, and if he promotes a second one, he's getting checkmated in this beautiful way. But unfortunately for him, Mamedyarov didn't see this. It seems he played king g7, and after queen b7, there is a obvious threat to have a second queen there with the discovered check. Knight f3 check, but queen takes f3. Rook h2 check, but now the king has the g5 square, and after h6 check, king f4, rook h4 check, king e5, and now Mamedyarov had to resign the game. The game is over. White's material advantage is just too much. White is threatening to take the bishop, the pawn is threatening to promote into another queen, and there is absolutely nothing black can do. If, for instance, bishop takes, queen g3 check, taking the rook, and the game is over once again. So, very interesting game, this Kramnik versus Mamedyarov, a game which could be decisive for the final standings, as after his last defeat against Topalov, Kramnik makes a comeback to win this game, which he in some point objectively speaking was losing. But okay, very interesting games for us the spectators, a very sharp and unbalanced game, hoping to see lots of lots of these kind of games, and thank